And also an update on something else we talked about. We were talking about scaffold matches here I think, on the past drive-through this past week. We were talking about some of the scaffold matches, and I mentioned that they did them in Louisville because that's where Jarrett started it, and that they had, they always drew better in Louisville. They finally did them in Memphis in 87 with the Lawler and Idol business, but I forgot. I was in error. They did the Coco Ware Bill Dundee scaffold match in 1982 in Memphis also, and they did one in 1983 when Dundee was a heel with Dundee and Dutch Mantell. And that's where fucking Dutch took that whip up there on the scaffold, and they were bullwhipping each other with the bullwhip on top of a scaffold. So that was interesting. But I've neglected to remember those, but it was still kind of the same thing that when they had the Dundee Coco Ware match, for example, in Louisville, they drew almost 6,000 people. It always boosted the house in Louisville. It didn't really, maybe the Lawler and Idol one for the time, and Lawler and oh goddamn, it's Lawler and Dutch and Idol and Rich. That's who it was. That one boosted the house. The other ones in Memphis never really boosted the house beyond what Memphis was doing normally. I think partially because there wasn't the legend of that big one like there was in Louisville. Like we said, that everybody in town claimed that they were there, and it did legitimately fill the building up, and people talked about it for years. They didn't have one of those in Memphis to start the trend off. So but there's a clarification there. Are you clarified?
Did they do that match in any of the other towns? I mean, if they did the scaffold match in Louisville and Memphis, is there a chance they did it anywhere else? I mean, they probably couldn't get a scaffold into Nashville, but were they running Lexington?
What do you mean, Jarrett and Don Green?
No, I'm talking about for
anything.
Coco and Dundee.
No, they did one in Rupp Arena in Lexington with Dundee and Bobby Eaton. And that's where Bobby took the backdrop up there, which was on the 2-foot wide scaffold. They made them 4 feet for the tag matches because that way, you could go past people, and it was a little bit easier. But the single matches, there was only one ladder, one board on the top of the ladder was so you could monkey bar underneath, but it was 2 feet wide. And Bobby goes like he's going to give Dundee a pile driver, and Dundee stood up under him, and Bobby took the backdrop on the scaffold. Fuck. And then that one, I'm going to say, because I took the pictures, I have them somewhere around here in the office, but I was at ringside. I'm going to say that scaffold was probably off the ring somewhere around, they had to use 8-foot sections. So it was somewhere 13, 14 feet off the ring. And Bobby he didn't take the bump feet first like he did at Starrcade because that was so much higher. He actually was hanging on with his hands and his feet underneath the ladder. And when Dundee, stomped the fingers or whatever he did, boom, 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 the climactic point, Bobby just let go and kind of took a fucking backdrop bump off of that one, which was insane. But the Lexington ring was a good ring. It had plenty of give.
It's amazing there weren't more injuries. I mean, other than your knees, considering the frequency in 84 and again in 86, and then 87, actually, the frequency of the scaffold matches, it's amazing that Dennis didn't get seriously hurt or Bobby.
And well, it's because Bobby always landed off kilter in some fashion. On the Starrcade match, he did turn his ankle somewhat. He was limping for a few days. It wasn't a serious injury. But Dennis had that goddamn balance, and he always knew where he was when he was up in the air somehow, taking a bump or a throw or whatever. He never landed awkwardly. And he got his feet under him where he could land at both feet at the same time, boom, and then kind of fling himself backwards where you couldn't really tell that he just landed on his feet. But he landed solid and firm every time. But yeah, it was a miracle that somebody didn't fucking slip at some point, and lose track of something.
Bobby was a high flyer, and he had been involved in a previous one, like you said before. So I can understand how he got convinced to do it. How was Dennis talked into that? I mean, do you remember when Dennis was first told he was going to do this?
Well, yes, we all were. It was, that was the blow off for us to leave Louisiana, which we're probably going to talk about later on in the program when the stuff we've been discussing when we first got there, what was going on in Mid-South at the time. But, yeah, Dundee said, yeah, we're going to have scaffold matches between you and the Rock and Roll, the big blow offs. And, everybody rolled their eyes, but at the same time, well, what the fuck? We're not going to say no, because look at the year we had and all those record gates everywhere and the business that the company is doing. We knew that was going to be almost another last Stampede round of checks to, and it was the second biggest gate and the second sellout that year for Houston, and sold out in Oak City and Tulsa. And, so we did. Dennis was going to be the last one to say we don't want to do those, because that's what we were there for, was to make that record amount of money. So, the only thing is, I think Dundee realized, especially because we were leaving the territory, they never even intimated, Cornette, you get up there, because we were leaving, and Dundee probably knew I would fuck myself up in some fashion. And we had to go somewhere else, so he didn't want to do that. But the reason why I did it for Crockett, for Dusty, is because we were staying. We weren't leaving. So even though we had to do the job, that wasn't supposed to be our blow-off. So Dusty was, if Cornette takes the bump last, the people will forget that the Midnight Express lost, and it'll be all on that, and that'll be the memorable pop for the thing, and that'll probably even put more heat on them, which it did. But unfortunately, also led to my surgery and etc. But so that's, if they had said at that point, Cornette, you got to take that bump, especially since we did 14 of them in Mid-South, every town on the way out, I would have probably have to said, I don't know. Because I've, we were leaving at that point, and I needed to be able to walk to Dallas. But I was just going to say, at Starrcade, it was like, this will be the biggest payoff we've ever gotten and the biggest thing we've ever done, which it was both. So I'll fucking do it.
Here's a weird question for you. You take the bump Thanksgiving 86 Starrcade. When did you book the trip to Hawaii?
What, February 87?
So you booked it right before you went, or was it already booked, in November?
When did I book it?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Like, how far in advance did you know you were going to go to Hawaii?
I can remember everything that we did in a wrestling ring 35 years ago, but you're expecting me to remember details about my honeymoon?
Oh, that's true. I forgot it was your honeymoon.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I forgot it was your honeymoon.
Yes, we had it booked. I can't remember how far in advance, but why? What was going to be your question to that?
Well, just in terms of the injury that you suffered coming out of the scaffold match, and knowing that you ended up needing knee surgery and time off, and you ended up needing time off for what it turns out was your honeymoon. I knew it was one of your trips to Hawaii. I was just wondering how, in terms of scheduling, because you never miss days, you never miss anything. I was wondering how far in advance everything was figured out for time off.
Oh, God. Well, now that you mention it, yes, I'm sure, told Dusty, because, he booked a month or 6 weeks out on paper at that point in time. But if you were going to be gone for a while, he needed as much notice as possible. I don't know, truthfully, when I told him. We did figure the trip in advance, but I actually only ended up taking off 2 weeks as I'm trying. Yeah, it was 2 weeks almost exactly after the scaffold for the surgery, because the weekend before the Christmas break was not only an Atlanta TV, but also our debut in Chicago at the Rosemont Horizon, which did a $150,000 house. And it was a big weekend. So I went back on the road for that Friday, Saturday, Sunday to do probably either 3 or 4 house shows and an Atlanta TV. And I was on crutches and miserable through the airport and miserable. in that fucking Rosemont Horizon, getting in and out of that place. But I wasn't going to, because we made like $4,000 in those 3 days. So I wasn't going to miss that. And then I got a chance to take another 10 days off for the Christmas break. So that was already scheduled as far as the Christmas break. So I only took 2 weeks off after the surgery and then had 10 days off for my wedding / honeymoon in February. But that's when I got suspended for
Fireball.
For the fireball and the cosmic fireball on Ronnie Garvin. Yes. And that was Dusty's reason to get me out of there for the trip.
So is that the craziest 4 or 5 month period of the Midnight Express for you? The scaffold match, the injury, you're getting ready to go on your honeymoon. Of course, then Dennis leaves right after the fireball angle. Is that the craziest period, you think?
That probably would have been right up there in terms of what the fuck is going on here. But yeah, between November and March, and then Stan was, by the first week of March, Stan was in, or second week or whatever.
Did Stan think you guys were done with scaffold matches? Like, oh, surely they will never do these again. I could join the team and I'll be safe.
Yes. Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
So I asked you how they convinced Dennis in 84. How did Dusty explain this or tell this to Stan in 87?
Well, no, then it was just, we saw it on the booking sheet for Starrcade, scaffold match, Rock and Roll Express Midnight. And we're like, shit. But here's the thing. What was Stan going to say at that point? I mean, he said this himself. His last week in Florida was like $300, and his first week for Crockett was like $3,000. So it's one of the feature matches at Starrcade. What's he going to fucking say? He always figured out a way to try to keep his feet under him and hope for the best. But he was not a fan of those things. And then the next year with the Fantastics.
Everyone forgets about that. Even I forget about the 88 matches.
Because those were just thrown in there because it was like, let's drop the cow for the Great American Bash. That was just the ultimate hot-shotting, because that's when business had been down. Late 87, early 88 sucked, and the TBS sale was imminent, so he was hot-shotting everything for the summer bashes to get the business up so it would look stronger going into the sale, which he did. But in the meantime, you know, some of them, most of the 88 bash matches between the Midnight and the Fantastics were either regular matches or bunkhouse matches with me involved. And those were more fun, and they could beat me, and that's what people wanted to see. But there was 4 or 5 scaffold matches, including, I think, in Detroit. And we just hated those because the Midnight and the Fantastics match was so good in any other context, with any other stipulation, any other rule, anything except that. So those were disappointing. Anyway, how did we get started on that?
Speaking of disappointing, what else do we have this week on The Experience?
Well, thank you very much.
Will we ever see a scaffold match again, do you think?
I hope not.
Is there a way with crash pads to make it safe?
No, because then if God damn it, a safe scaffold match that's like a low-fat Twinkie. Just don't eat the fucking Twinkie. The whole idea of the scaffold match is not to be safe. If you put crash pads around the ring, people are like, what the fuck? If you put crash pads in the ring, people are like, what the fuck? It just don't do it. Just forget about it. Nobody needs, and see, now these knuckleheads, somebody would get hurt bad because they'd figure something out. And it was only, as we mentioned, it was the luck of fools and crazy people that Vic Grimes wasn't paralyzed in that thing in XPW.
Every time you see it, it's never easy to see that. It's always, oh my God, I can't believe this happened.
Yeah, and I mean, that was on purpose. It wasn't an accident. Jack meant to do it, but still, nobody needs to have those matches.